Hey. Okay, so I've been wanting to post this video for quite a while, but I just haven't had a chance. But in light of Liv's first birthday, this seems like a good opportunity to touch on the differences between a home birth versus a hospital birth. And obviously, take and leave whatever you'd like from this. This is just my experience. Um, my first, my oldest daughter was in the hospital, and my youngest was at home. So, hospital birth. Um, Obviously, the ambiance, the environment, it is completely different. You have zero say. Lights are on. It's bright. It's loud. You don't have a say of really who's in your room, how many people, and you don't really have I mean, you might have a say. With me, it was my first, so I didn't really know what was going on. And to be completely honest, like, even with a second or a third, or if I'm in the hospital, I'm just going to trust them. Even if I advocate, which I did for my first one, I wanted to do a natural birth, like I didn't want any interventions. I didn't want I didn't want an epidural. I didn't want anything. I just wanted to let my body do its thing. They insist, like they argue with you while you're in labor. You're not being a hero. You're not being a big shot. Just take it. And when you're at a very weak point, it's easy to give in. And obviously, some things are unplanned. A C-section, sometimes, interventions need to be made. But if you're young, you're healthy, your body knows what it's doing. Your body was made for this. This is what it's supposed to do. So theoretically, with, perfect circumstances, it shouldn't even be a thing. You shouldn't have to argue, I don't want an epidural. Stop telling me, stop asking me when your, contractions are a minute apart and you've already not taken anything this whole time for hours and hours and hours. So basically that's what happened with me. I was in labor for hours, got to the hospital, still in labor. And then at one point, I think it literally was like maybe 2 or 3 hours before I actually had her. But I don't even know if I would have had her because they intervened a lot. So I ended up having the epidural. I ended up being induced. My water did break. But they still induced me. I remember I puked before I had the epidural. But I don't know. It was like, it felt like there were just so many pieces unnecessary pieces. And then thinking back on it, I'm like, would that have happened? Or when did it have happened? But now, having had a home birth, I know, which I'll get into in a second. But, so being in labor, they put you on your back. And I don't think, maybe there's other options. They didn't give me another option. I was just on my back and had to push. It didn't feel comfortable, didn't feel natural. This is just, they put you in this position and this is where you are, because at that point I did have an epidural, so I couldn't turn over or do what felt right or comfortable to just labor naturally. And then also there were I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 people in there, nurses, not the doctor. The doctor strolled in literally right before I had her and just cut me. So I ended up having a episiotomy. And just pulled her out. I remember the pushes. I couldn't feel the contractions to know push. And I only learned the difference when I had a natural birth at home, to listen to my body to know when to push. So they were yelling, 1, 2, and put, yelling loud in your face. And it's not at all something that makes you, comfortable, unless you're that's what you do when you're counting down the new year. You're not, I don't know, it just wasn't great for me. Hi, baby. So then after the actual delivery, They basically roll you over and cart you to your room, and they come and check on you every couple hours, so you don't get to sleep, you don't get to rest, you don't get to just like relax. They immediately take your baby, they immediately wash it, and apparently it's very healthy to have the vermix, whatever it's called, just lay on the baby when they're born. And I did ask to not have it washed, to not have her washed, but they don't listen, because why would they? You're in their space and they do what they want. And then they did have, the one helpful thing that I would say is in the morning, they did have a lactation consultant come in, and it wasn't the most helpful thing in the whole wide world, but because I didn't have any experience, I had no idea about breastfeeding. She did help. She didn't really do anything about latching, but she didn't have any latching issues, so it was fine. But basically, they come, they do a little 5 or 10 minute consultation, and basically if you want more, then you pay for more, which was nice. So I did learn things from that. The other side of it is that I did not exclusively breastfeed her, because I was in the hospital, and even before I left the hospital, she already had a bottle. Like, they gave me a bottle while I was there. Even though they try to push breastfeeding on you and they say it's so much more healthy and it's like a better option and blah, 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 all these things, you should breastfeed. You should, that's it. There's no other choice. I literally had a bottle, like, as I left. Like, and I didn't bring any. They brought the bottles. They gave me the formula. Like, that was, like, all them. The other thing that was really helpful is, for the first time, making, like, the diapers. So, for me and the baby, actually. So, you have, for me, or the lady who gave, delivered, you have your diaper, and then you have, like, the padsicle, so, like, the iced pad, or like it's a big ice pack, so you crack it and then it gets really cold, and then I got perineal foam, and you wear that. So it was really helpful because they showed me that whole thing. The other thing that they helped with was how to swaddle, and then also burping, feeding, like all the stuff that I didn't know. I didn't have my mom here. I didn't have anyone here that could help. And it wasn't ever like, I don't know, I was never so maternal. So it wasn't anything that I ever knew, or like those things I didn't know. They told you about, the baby sleeping on its back or its belly or its side, or, burping and all that stuff. And that was so extremely helpful. And I don't know how I would have learned that otherwise. Because when the delivery happened, no one was here to visit. Like, we couldn't have visitors. No one was flying, none of that. So then to go to the other side of the home birth, it was quiet. At one point, my midwife and her doula were sleeping on my sofa. I was at home, so I was in the comfort, like, of my own space. I knew where things were. It just was a lot more relaxing. So it felt like things could come much more naturally. I labored in my bathtub for a bit. I think from when I labored in my bathtub, and this was completely natural, no epidural, no medicine, no nothing. When I labored in the bathtub to when I had her, once I got out of the bathtub, I might have had her, I was pushing for maybe an hour or something. It wasn't that much. It was just a much smoother process. And maybe it was because it was my second time. and my body maybe knew what it was doing. But the reality is it was a very different experience. So it's not like my body was following what it did the first time, because the first time I didn't really have to push. I didn't have to work. I didn't have to labor. I didn't have to do anything, because once I got to the hospital, even though I labored and had contractions, I didn't have to push her out. They literally cut her out. So it was a completely different experience in that sense. I knew when my water broke. I was in the bathtub and it just sounded like a bag of chips popped. The other difference is like knowing that I worked for it. I'll post a video and so you can see, but literally I had like broken blood vessels all over my face, just from pushing so hard. So obviously I wasn't breathing right. Obviously I wasn't doing things right, but it shows that I was, my body, like I was working, I was pushing. The other thing that was really interesting is the next day after I had the birth from home, my ribs, my whole midsection, everything, even my arms, I was so sore because I was holding onto the bathtub and I was just like, every contraction I was pushing. And to be completely honest, if I were to have another kid, I feel like I would do it from home so I can see if I can do it better, right? So this sounds, it's like the athlete in me. It's so weird to think, but like I would do it from home so I could figure out my breathing properly and I could, figure out how to relax my muscles instead of being so tight and like compressed. So it's a really interesting experience to break down the two. The other thing with the home birth is the healing process was very different. I didn't have any hemorrhoids or anything like that with the hospital birth because I was cut. So there was no pushing. With the home birth, there was a lot of pushing. So I did end up having those. And they're so uncomfortable. And because they're so uncomfortable, it would almost make me want to do a hospital birth again. Like, the truth is there's pros and cons to both. So it's really a preference thing. It's not a, this is better and this is what everyone should do. Because it's not. And having experienced both, there's pros and cons to both. Like, truly, being in a hospital, you didn't work. I didn't work. It was like, it was just uncomfortable afterward because you just want to sleep and you're shaking because your hormones are all wonky and like you just can't stop shaking and shivering and your teeth are chattering and it's so uncomfortable. But that also happened at the home birth. When I was in labor having contractions, which happened at the hospital, it also happened at home. I puked and I wasn't sure if it was the stuff they gave me at the hospital that made me puke, but it wasn't. It was just the process. I puked. And I puked, I think it was right around the same time during labor, I puked at home also, and it was completely unmedicated. So yeah, those are some things to think about, whether you're home or hospital. I did think that it was really nice to sleep in my own bed. That sounds crazy. It's not only for me, but also for my husband and for my daughter and our dog. Like, we live somewhere that we don't really have family that can just be here, because when you're pregnant, you could go into labor anytime. So even if we have family flying in to help and to stay with us, I could come when I was due, or I came 2 weeks late or a week early. Like, there's such a huge time frame for when it could actually go down that who knows if anyone's actually going to be there to help you. Now, if you're close to family or relatives or friends or someone where you can leave your kid and put your dog or have someone come help stay, that's like a whole nother thing. That's, a whole nother component, and one less thing to think about. But for us, we don't have that luxury. So anyhow, back to more home birth things. Yeah. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask. You can DM me. You can drop a comment. And I'm happy to answer. I can post a whole nother video on that. Specific questions. One other thing that I would add about the home birth is that it made me breastfeed, and I breastfed her much longer. I breastfed her for almost 10 months as opposed to just supplementing with my first one for 4 months, 3 or 4 months. So it was very different, exclusively breastfeeding when I had the home birth for almost 10 months versus the other thing that happened because, and I'm sure that it was because I was in the hospital because I got cut. I ended up getting a yeast infection. I've never had a yeast infection my whole life. And they say that after delivery, labor, pregnancy, whatever, it's kind of common because it's all new, like bacteria and stuff. But with my second one, I didn't have that because I wasn't cut and it was just a natural birth and my body knew what it was doing, I'm guessing. And that also is part of the reason that I had to stop breastfeeding because I had to take a pill to get rid of it, the yeast infection. So yeah, I think that's it.